Welcome to Lumenaries, the podcast, where we shed light on the stories of remarkable individuals shaping our world. I'm Christopher Bolton, your host on this journey through the realms of creativity and achievement. Today we are joined by the talented Rob Koenig, whose recent recognition as the Parnelli Lighting Designer of the Year is nothing short of inspiring. In a field filled with his close friends and industry legends, Rob's win speaks volumes about his dedication and artistry. From his early days as a stagehand to his current role crafting unforgettable grand-scale experiences for Metallica and television audiences alike, Rob's journey is a testament to hard work and passion. This is Lumenaries, the podcast, where the spotlight is on learning. So tell me a bit about yourself, and then our listeners know how you got into this crazy game.
Crazy game was all by accident. I'll start with the origin story and then kind of continue on from there. I was born and raised in Florida. Grew up in an area of Florida called the Space Coast. It's kind of the Cocoa Beach, Eastern Seaboard area. And my dad worked for NASA for 30 plus years. So I grew up next to an Air Force base and next to rockets going up all the time. That was our childhood. And obviously when you're young and you see planes and stealth bombers and C-130s going over your head, you want to be a pilot, you want to be an astronaut, you want to be all those things. But music grabbed me very, very early. My brother and my sister were very, very much older than me. They were 13, 14 years older than me. So when I was 4 or 5 years old, they were handing me rock records like Nazareth and Aerosmith and
Brilliant.
And Zeppelin and Sabbath and all this stuff. And very early, Rush was like one of my favorite bands. Kiss was, I was a huge Kiss fan when I was a kid. And that grabbed me. My brother was a drummer and on the drum line in high school. And my brother had these, Tom Selleck good looks and the long hair and the whole deal. And boy, I wanted to be just like him. So I wanted to play drums too. At the same time, my dad was a classical piano player and I wanted to play piano. So I was very early on instruments. I started piano when I was 5 and drums when I was 9. Obviously, drums were my passion. Fell in love with them. High school rock bands, metal bands, that whole deal. Played in high school drumline. Loved it.
Wow.
Got out of school and didn't know what I was going to do. And my dad, being Mr. 4.0 MIT graduate, saw very early that I was a music fiend and I could not give a shit about anything else. So we had found this little school called Full Sail in Orlando, and he recommended I went there. Now, it's kind of funny when I talk about Full Sail because people either cringe or they're kind of amazed. But when I went to Full Sail, they had just started making a name for themselves. It was 92, a year after I graduated high school. And they had just built their Studio A with their Neve Flying Fader console and all that stuff. And I wanted to be a producer studio engineer. Because just like the rest of us my age, we'd sit around, all of us Gen Xers would sit around and read the liner notes of every record in existence.
But this was also way before moving lights or anything interesting. I know I did the same. I studied sound. I was like, I don't want to be anywhere near lighting. That looks so boring.
You know what? I didn't even know what lighting was. I didn't get it. I didn't understand it. I didn't comprehend it, but I knew what audio was. And I knew that I had the patience to sit in the studio and try to get a kick drum sound right for 12 hours. None of that stuff bothered me. I loved it. We knew every producer, every liner note, every engineer, and that's what I wanted to do. So get out of Full Sail and you find out very quickly that those jobs are very hard to come by. Very, very hard to come by. So a friend of mine who played in another band had a small sound and light company and asked me if I wanted to come do some work with them. And I did as a stagehand the first couple of times. And it's kind of funny looking back on it now because that show, the first stagehand show I ever did was Danzig headlining and Marilyn Manson was the middle opener and Korn was the opener.
Wow. Those are big names.
And that was my introduction to it. And it was a 1,500 seat club called The Edge in Orlando. And that was my first day of being a stagehand. Hung out with the Korn guys all day.
Fantastic.
Went and got them beer. And they were just dudes on a shitty tour bus at the time. They didn't really have anything. Downbeat of that show hit that night, and I'd never seen a crowd react like that. I was blown away with what Korn brought to the show, and the whole show was amazing.
I saw Korn in Johannesburg on the My Coke Fest a couple of years ago. When I say a couple of years ago, this is probably early 2000s, and the whole place just erupted. It was quite something.
I'll tell you what, like, but especially back then, the drummer David would hit that 808 kick drum and they'd go into blind. And like, I've seen just a roof rip off a place. It was just unbelievable. Like, I would liken it to like the first time I saw Pantera, or not for nothing, the first time I saw Metallica was just like, it was unbelievable. I'd never seen a reaction like that. So fast forward just a few months later, their lighting guy was leaving the company and he was going on to do bigger things and they needed a lighting guy. So I gave it a shot. Didn't fall in love with it immediately. I would say it took me about a month. And I was just telling the story in another pod the other day that the band that kind of set the tone for me was Space Hog. They were rolling in Florida. They were just blowing up on that single in the meantime. They didn't have a lighting guy with them. And it was the first show that it was mine. I was allowed to do what I wanted and fell in love with it. Absolutely fell in love with it. And a year later, I was on the road with some friends from home, Matchbox 20. And then it just kept going from there. After Matchbox, they sold 1 million records and they filed the whole hometown crew got let go by management because now they could afford real people, quote unquote. Yeah. So they fired all of us. All 5 of us went home. And then from there, I got to go to Deep Purple for a little while, which was an amazing experience and working for those guys. And I mean, it's kind of funny to think about it now. Like in 97, when I went to go work for Deep Purple, I've been doing lights for 2 years. And I'm like, God, these guys are so old now. And they're still out doing it. Sans, John Lord has passed, but like all the rest of the guys are still out doing it. And I'm in 97 when they had been around, I don't know, 25 years. I'm going, wow, these dudes are so old. It's so funny.
Deep Purple was one of my mom's favorites growing up. She used to play that a lot.
And you know what? Is your mom still around? Is your mom still with us?
Yeah. She's still around.
You can absolutely tell her that they were the coolest people. They were lovely.
Oh, awesome.
2 or 3 airports. I remember sitting there with John Lord, buying me Bloody Marys in the morning and just us talking about music. Pacey, the drummer, loved talking about drums and stuff. So I would sit around and just chat with him about drums. Ian Gillan one night grabbed me up and took me out to a couple strip clubs and got me incredibly drunk. Roger introduced me to his daughter who was my age at the time. And her and I had a great time and hit it off, and, just cool people, man. They were just
brilliant.
They were a great bunch. They really set a tone. And for me, it was a great learning lesson because I found out after the fact that I was there to cover for Louis Ball, who was their LD, but they didn't tell me that at the time. But Louis got out of rehab and they were like, well, he's going to come back. We have loyalty to him. And that really blew me away to see that there's that kind of loyalty in this business, that he had to go away for a problem, but he's part of this family and he's going to come back. And I love the fact that they did that. So I never held a grudge with that.
It's pretty cool how your angle, how you approached that, and rather saw that as a good thing and not a bad thing,
I mean, I was certainly bummed about it because I loved working with them, but it was like, man, that's so fucking cool. I hope someone sticks up for me like that one day, like really. After that, I kind of felt like my career was going really, really fast. So I wanted to put the brakes on. So I worked out of home with my, we had a new daughter. My daughter Cleo was just born.
Okay.
And so I went and got a job at the House of Blues Orlando and worked out of there and a couple lighting shops, including Very Light Orlando, for the next 3 or 4 years before I went back out on the road again in 01.
Okay.
But those who
did you go on the road with?
The first tour back was a band called Scrape, another hometown band. That was from the Orlando area, and we ended up doing a 5-month tour with Pantera and Slayer. Which was nothing short of amazing, and lifelong friends from that. Somebody just sent me a picture the other day of that tour, and it's so funny. It's me and Sonny Satterfield and Michael Duke, who's now a video director, and a great one at that, all standing in front of house back in 01. And it's such a trip to see that.
Doesn't it blow your mind when you see the pictures of the old days and you look at yourself and the picture looks like it's from the 50s or 60s? It seems like such a long time ago.
It's such a trip. It really is, But those are some great times with some very bonded friends there. So having Pantera opening up some dates on our current Metallica tour has been great to to catch up with those guys,
Awesome.
see them again, and now that Charlie from Anthrax is playing with them and being able to see Charlie on a daily basis, he's just one of the sweetest guys ever and one of my biggest heroes growing up as a drummer.
I also saw they announced that the bass guitarist Duff McKagan from Guns N' Roses was going to be playing with AC/DC. Isn't it amazing how the bands are like?
Oh, I didn't see that. I didn't even
Yeah,
know that.
isn't it amazing how the guys are just like they used to always play on the same bills together years earlier, and now they're switching musos between bands, and I think it's just amazing.
I really love the fact that I did the Guns N' Roses reunion, not in this lifetime thing in 2016 with Phil Ely. And when we launched that one, Axel had accepted the job for Brian Johnson's job with AC/DC, and he was going back and forth. And it was amazing to see somebody as big of a rock star as Axl Rose humbled by the fact that he was working for his heroes.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah, that
It
is
was
someone.
kind of an interesting shift in a human. Like you kind of see it going down. He was he was definitely humbled by it. And I think it did a lot for him. Duff has always been one of the humblest, kindest human beings ever. So he's just going to go out there and absolutely love it. He's going to be great.
Awesome.
I didn't even know that. He just told me though, but Duff is just wonderful. But yeah, it's kind of interesting. They just keep trading in and out for Guns N' Roses members. But they're like, I mean, come on, let's face it. Aside from like them and the Foo Fighters, there's not like any big time, just like straight up good rock and roll bands that are doing it right now. You know what I mean? There's
Absolutely. I'm the biggest Foo Fighters fan. My dog's name is David Growl.
That's funny.
And he actually looks a little bit like David. He's a black spoodle and he's got this long curly hair.
Oh, that's funny.
And yeah, so I said to my because my wife and the kids wanted a dog. I said we can get a dog as long as he looks like David Grohl, and we can call him David Growl. So we did.
That is amazing. I love that.
Yeah. So just jumping ahead now to what happened to you recently and being not only nominated for a Parnelli, but to be nominated one with Nook Schoenfeld's name on it. I remember as a young designer hanging onto every word the man wrote about it. I think it was the PLSN magazine back in the day.
Yeah.
So many articles that I couldn't wait. It was like running to the post box to collect my PLSN magazine to read the
Mhm.
articles. It was such a special memory. But then, did you actually know Nook personally?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, we had many dinners over the years together, had quite a few drinks over the years. I think him and I read, I don't remember exactly when we met. I remember the show, I just don't remember the year. It was the late 2000s. So we met fairly late. But we hit it off immediately. He had come down to the Bahamas. I was down there as, I don't know, programmer, crew chief, kind of everything for this um outdoor stage at the Atlantis Resort, and the local pop station was doing a show, and Rihanna was the headliner. T-Pain was
Okay.
just starting to blow up. He was on the bill. Rihanna was on it. And I was, the Bahamian crew, there's just not a lot of people who really are into it. So out of a crew of 10 guys, you might have one that really, really gets it and really wants to do it. So it's a bit of a struggle, and you're loading in on that really soft Bahamian sand on a stage, and it's a
Oh,
rough, it's a
working
rough,
on the beach is rough.
in that climate, and it's like September, and it's 98 degrees with 130% humidity, and
That's
it's
crazy.
destroying your soul, and you've taken off your shoes, and you're just praying to God you don't step on anything because you're wading through the soft sand that's on the beach. It's gross. It's not fun. Um,
No.
so Nook came over to just kind of check up on everything, and I was waiting on something and was sitting at my computer updating the drawing or updating the next drawing or something. And he comes over, so use Vectorworks, huh? And I'm like, yeah, I'm just kind of really starting to really dig into it and learn it. And he sat there with me before, I don't even know if we even introduced each other. And he just sat there with me, showing me keystrokes and shortcuts.
Oh, cool.
He sat there with me for like 2 hours. Now, the funny part about this is later in his life, when he was doing his old man musings, when he was writing those, he wrote about the day that he met me. And I was very flattered by that. But the funny
I
part,
remember that.
he tells the story of what happened that night. And what happened that night is he was running an Avo Lights Pearl Rolla Q. And for those that don't know, on the left-hand side of the master faders, there are 5 submasters. There's a grandmaster, There's the upper row of faders, the lower row of faders masters. There's a flash button master, and then the sub master on top of that. And it's kind of repetitive and useless as far as I'm concerned. But he went to go do a blackout, and he yanked down all the faders, and I'm just sitting, 3 feet to his left and behind him, and he goes to hit the next cue, and the only thing that's on is spots. He can't get anything else up. And I very quickly just look over, and I see he's yanked down the first two grandmasters, and I quickly back up, and he's got the rig back. And he tells that story. The part of the story that I love about that day is him sitting with me, doesn't know me, hangs out with me for a couple hours showing me Vectorworks. And then the other part of where him and I really hit it off is we're having a hard time getting signal to some of the lights. And he immediately picked up the fact that the kid that was going up and climbing in the truss and data and everything had run 50 and 100-foot jumpers in between a dozen moving heads.
Oh wow, yeah, that would do it.
I didn't pick that up. Exactly. So he's like, what do you got up there between the first two lights? And the kid unplugs the light and shows us a 50-footer. He's like, we chuck up a 10-footer. He's like, put that in between them. Boom, there's the next light. And I was like, oh my God, he just did nothing but create ohms resistance here. So that was another funny part that I really loved that Nook jumped in on. I just had no problems with it. And he was lovely. And then over the years, we'd see each other at trade shows. We'd be able to hook up in Vegas every once in a while. We'd chat on the phone. Got together in Orlando for a dinner with a couple of our other common friends there. And he was just always very supportive of me and almost all of us. And he saw all of us up and comers and invited me to come see Kid Rock shows when he was in town and come here, check this out here, put my comms on and listen to how we're calling spots and just all that stuff. So he was definitely a mentor. It wasn't just to me, man. He was a mentor to a lot of us.
Yeah, it always seemed like he was like a big brother guy.
Spot on. Yeah,
absolutely.
He was a wonderful guy. So yeah, to be able to not only be nominated for the first one with his name on it, but to get it was the first thing that I said. I'm like, this is being nominated is cool, but I want this one. I want the one with Nooks.
That's amazing.
And I'm very proud to have it. I'm very proud to have it.
So you're sitting at the table. I'm assuming your wife's with you.
Yeah.
And they announce your name. What did you go through?
Well, I kind of want to back up just a little bit because I was already a little bit numb with all of this because I was really blown away with the nomination because it wasn't just my nomination. It was the three of us that work on the design of the show that all got nominated in categories.
Uh-huh.
So that meant the world to me. And to me, I didn't give a shit if one of us won or all three of us won. I wanted any of us to win because Metallica as a whole have kind of been ignored aside from audio on the design side. So that meant the world to me that people got the show. They got Dan's work, they got my work, they got Gene's work. And we're all able to come in and all pistons firing that people got it and that all three of us got the nomination. Obviously, I wanted it for personal reasons because of Nook's name being on it. But when they went down the roster of names, I was just like, wow, okay, here we go. And the kicker is that they were doing it right after the in memoriam section. So here I am looking at all the people that have left the business over the past year, and they put up Jimmy Buffett, and I got some tears rolling down my face, and I'm like, oh my God. And Lighting Designer of the Year award. I'm like, oh, you assholes. Like, right. So I'm trying to straighten back up. And I got to tell you, when they announced my name, it was Stuart Ross, and he's got a lot of history with Metallica as well. So it was kind of fitting that he was up there doing it. When he announced my name, I didn't hear it. My wife had to tap me on the shoulder. Honey, they just called your name, because I was 100% certain there was no fucking way I was getting that award because of the other competition in that category.
Yeah. And you're so modest as well. You've always been so down to earth and down to ground. So I can imagine that.
Okay, first off, let's start with the one that I thought was going to get it, which is Chris Kuroda, a dear old friend of mine. He's been doing fish for 35 years, and that dude's never gotten the Parnelli. I am like, this is his year. This is the one he's going to get, let alone him and GIF, his programmer, both deserve this fucking award because their show is gorgeous. Let's go to Tobias motherfucking Rylander, who designed Pink's recent show. Like, not Pink. I'm so sorry. I just said that wrong. Beyonce's most recent show. Like, how am I going to compete with that? Tobias is a rock star and an absolute genius with what he does. Let's go to I would call him a protege, Eric Birdie out of Brazil, who designs the most beautiful show for Ghost. I mean, that show is so well choreographed, so well put together, cheesy, funny, serious, dark, all at the same time. It's like going to a Broadway play. He crushed it. Mitchell Schellinger, who did Shinedown's tour, that's what he was nominated for. Just a fucking fabulous looking rock show with some kick-ass automation in it. Like, yes, all of these shows are
Brilliant.
badass shows. And I'm like, I know our show is good. I'm really proud of it. I'm super stoked on it. There is no way we're getting this. So I was just blown away that they called my name. Blown away that they called my name.
Oh, that's incredible, man.
So my wife taps me on the shoulder. She's like, honey, you got to go get your award. And I didn't have anything prepared. I had no speech. I'm telling her on the way there, I'm like, there is no fucking way I'm getting this award. I'm so stoked for Kuroda, though, because he's going to get it. I was already resolved with that. And Chris and I joked around about it. I'm like, well, I voted for you. And he's like, I voted for you.
How many years have you been with Metallica? How many? I'm just going to give you a few questions, and then you can just ramble on. But this was thinking about the stats, around thinking big. How many years have you been with Metallica? How many stadium shows do you think you have performed with them? How many countries have you worked in? And do you have any idea how many millions of people's minds you have blown?
August 2008. Not a fucking clue. Not a fucking clue. Started with them in 2008, August, thanks to Butch Allen, who had quit previously. My whole plan is I was going to go out and be Butch's lighting director because he had taken over design at that point. He had decided to leave. He was instrumental in getting John Broderick back in connection with everybody, and that relationship started back up after John had to leave for personal reasons in 2002. And then I never thought that there would be a chance in hell that I'd get the job once Butch had left, but I'll be damned. He put me on Broderick's radar and was like, this is your guy. He's like, he's loyal. He's not going to come in. He's not going to try to fuck your show up. He's not going to try to steal your gig. He just is a big fan of the band. He's a big fan of you. He's a protege of mine, and just wants to do it. So John came out. I was doing Billy Idol at the time. I was for the most part with Billy Idol for about 15 years, and came out, saw a show, gave me some kudos, gave me some things to work on, and about a month later, I was being called to fly into San Francisco and start pre-production.
That's incredible.
I was nervous. I was scared. The biggest thing I had done to that point was a 2-truck tour, and here I am walking into 16 trucks. Scared out of my mind, man. Just absolutely scared.
Those are some really big shoes to fill.
Dude, are you kidding me? Like walking in, first off, I know the gravity because I was such a fan since I was a kid of the band, and just the gravity of the situation. And they're making basically what was a comeback record after Saint Anger. So, they had fallen from grace quite a bit. They were kind of a joke at the time, but I still was like, they're one of my favorites. I want to go do this. And managed to put on a fantastic fucking show. And over the years, John had stepped aside, and slowly I just started taking over more and more of the design work. And that's kind of where we ended up sitting. Probably about 2014, 2015, I'd become the full designer for the band.
Amazing.
And I mean, the things that I learned from those guys were, John Broderick invented spot calling. Him and Alan Rungerleiter, as far as I'm concerned, are the best spot callers that ever existed. And I got to learn all of their tricks and everything.
It really is a skill that you just can't put money on. It's like one of the hardest things.
And it's a lost art form. There's not very many people that can do it anymore. I really don't even do it anymore. Most of our stuff is not necessarily automated, but I have a front of house tech that is with me, and he knows all the spot cues now. So he drives intensity from his console. I've given him, it's been really nice because I've been giving him creative some creative control there. I tell them, I was like, it's in the middle of the show. I'm not going to correct you on anything. I was like, after the show, if there's something that you've done that I don't like, or if there's something that I really dug that you did, I'll give you a note on it. And I was like, but for the most part, you know what's supposed to be happening. You know where the cues are. Um, get those down and then start to embellish. And he does. We're using, RoboSpot like everybody else is now. So all the need for calling like it is anymore on a tour doesn't really exist too much anymore. To a certain extent, but more and more of these RoboSpot systems. And I kind of find it interesting that working in TV, I hear more spot calling in TV because they're still traditionally calling spots, because you just don't have that kind of time to embed every single spot cue, let alone live TV is not, it may be choreographed, but it's not perfect. And you need that to not rely on the cue list. So,
but also what you're doing is in the round, so it's even more complex.
It's very complex. It really is, and it takes a long time to get there. And I've been very blessed to be asked by other artists to come and work on their in the round shows, because I've got an amazing understanding of how to do those shows now. And because working on Metallica's, I got to work on one with Butch for Carrie Underwood. That was an in the round show, so I get handfuls of calls every now and again when someone's trying to do an in the round show.
So the tech that sits next to you and is doing these spot cues for you, what's his name?
That is my friend John Niles.
John Niles, you lucky bastard. You're learning from the best, mate. I love that you're giving back, bro. That's just amazing.
Well, it's funny because John created his position. It was not a position that ever really existed. And he just kept coming out to front of house and kept setting up and kept learning and kept networking stuff and kept doing all this stuff until finally one day I'm just like, all right, cool, give this a shot. And I've been having him run all that stuff. And it was kind of inspired by a conversation I had with Scott Holthouse, who's my friend that does the Chili Peppers. And he was like, man, once you get to take off that Clearcom headset, you're just your night is so free, and you actually get to enjoy your work again. And
I struggle with comms. I really do.
And I tell you what, after all those years, and I've called not only spots on a lot of our tours, but I also call the automation cues on, Metallica tours and other tours as well, that it has been very nice to not have to talk at all if I don't need to, and just enjoy the show. And it really has freed up my mind quite a bit to be able to look at other details in the show and things that we can improve tomorrow and things that we can change, or something I didn't notice before because you're wrangling all the spots and everything else. So it's been very freeing to be able to do that.
Oh, absolutely. It's just actually really just to get into the music again and feel the passion. And instead of having to have that stressed feeling in your stomach the whole time that you're going to fuck something up.
The guys are only doing 25 shows a year anymore. You know what I mean? It's a small number of shows. It's somewhere between 25 and 35, depending on the year. And the shows are big, and they've gotten to a point where they're kind of the new Rolling Stones, right? People will travel to come see them.
Absolutely.
So they can look at the number of markets. But what that means for them is they're rehearsing more, and they're putting every ounce of energy into every single show. They are really on that tour. They're not just going through the motions. I don't think they've ever phoned in a show in their life, so it's kind of unfair for me to say. But there's no chance of them even going through the motions on this, because it's a massive stage. It's a massive undertaking. There's a lot of things for them to remember up there. There's a lot of things for them to navigate up there, and they have to be on it every night. Lars is coming in and rehearsing 3 nights a week in the tuning room. And he's probably rehearsing, I'd say, 12 hours a week before they even gets to the show. His drumming is tighter than I've heard it in years. The band is just absolutely just on top of it, because they know they can only present themselves so many times a year now. So they don't want to falter on a particular show. They're crushing right now, man. It's the best I've ever heard.
But you've always been able to tell that they're hard workers, and they really, when you see the shows, even the shows recordings I've seen, you can just tell the guys they're into it, and they're proud to be there, and they deserve to be there, most of all.
Oh, very much so. Well, the deserving to be there wavers with them. I think it's kind of fascinating because, some days they understand who they are, and some days I think that they think they're the smallest band that ever existed.
Humble, hey?
Yeah. There is that dichotomy. Like some days they grasp it, and some days they're just like, because we went through a thing with them a few years ago where they didn't feel like our show was big enough or this or that or the other. And I'm just like, none of us could figure out what was going on. And our video director at the time, Marcia Capiston, actually said it. She's like, "Oh my God, I finally get it." They go, "What?" She goes, "You've never seen Metallica live."
Hmm.
She's like, "I've never seen Metallica show live. You're always up on stage." So she put together a lookbook of the show, and they were like, "Oh,"
Wow.
like they had no idea all of the stuff that was going on around them. And I just think it throws them for a loop every once in a while. I mean, James especially is a very modest,
Yeah.
humbled man. Um, he's been through a lot in his life. You think that he is James fucking Hetfield 24/7.
Yeah, but he's not.
Yeah, I think he's just like the rest of us. He's insecure. There's a great video on YouTube if you have the time.
I love movies on YouTube
I
about people I love.
I think when we were in it was I think we were in South America, and he came up on stage and he basically said that I didn't think I was going to be able to get up here today. I think I was feeling down. I was questioning my own abilities as a front man. I didn't think I'd be able to do it. And the band all came up, said, "Man, no matter what's going on, we've got your back." And he said all this in front of a live audience. And I got to tell you,
Wow, goosebumps.
that video has a lot of amazing views and comments on it because it really showed that he can't be James Hetfield all the fucking time. Nobody can. And I think what Corey Taylor is going through right now is also making people realize that this is fucking tough, man. And you start these bands when you're young and you're angry, and people expect you to be young and angry for 40 fucking years. And it's really tough to be young and angry all the fucking time and not have it fuck your head up,
Exactly. Exactly.
you know? So what James has gone through, what I've witnessed from him and his addiction issues, and what we're all starting to see Corey Taylor go through, what we just saw Mike Patton go through, these are all very real things, and I think it's great that these big macho dudes are talking about mental health awareness. James in the middle of the show now, because for years you couldn't talk about suicide. James now in the middle of Fade to Black, when the big part starts at the end, he starts talking about how we're not supposed to talk about suicide, but how are we going to correct anything if we don't talk about it? And I love it. I love the fact that he is being very vocal about mental health and mental health awareness. And there's a couple ads before our show where we talk about suicide hotlines, and well, I say we, the band, mental health, and these are numbers you can call. You're not alone, and I love it. I absolutely love it.
Yeah, it's something that has really come to the foreground, especially after COVID. I know I personally have and had lots of struggles with my mental health, and I think COVID brought a lot of people to their knees. And I love that the band is actually having the opportunity, or having taken the opportunity, to actually use this grand stage they're on to bring awareness to people in their lowest times of their lives. I love that.
It's so funny because you're absolutely right, because during the pandemic, I as well sought help. And I'm so glad I did. And there was issues that I was dealing with for years that I didn't even realize I was dealing with. And they all came to a head during the pandemic. My wife recommended it for the umpteenth time to go talk to somebody, and I did. And you know what it made me realize that you're not a bad person. You just have a couple wires that are crossed, or they're just not connected. And that's why that whole field exists. There's only two people that they're two professions, their jobs didn't change during the pandemic. And that's trash men and psychiatry. If anything, psychiatry increased because they were in so much demand. And I really have been a champion of and supported anybody that needs to go talk to somebody. Have somebody on our tour that will say, "I am not available from here to here on these days because that's my appointment." Then you, by all means, take that time because I want you to be okay. Touring is not easy, and I'm glad that we're starting to get rid of all the big macho bullshit about touring and realizing that it's tough. It's a grind. It's difficult to be away from family, friends, and loved ones for that long. It's difficult to be away from your pets for that long. It is, it's the greatest job in the world, and it can also take the biggest toll on you. Jet lag is real. It is a very difficult thing to overcome. Your circadian rhythms and everything else get all screwed up when you're jumping all around the globe like we do. Read or look up anything on how pilots and cabin staff deal with um, all of that, because it's very real for them as well. They're constantly changing time zones and going around the globe and changing pressurized cabin to non-pressurized cabin. All of that stuff, it takes a toll on you. Dealing with people that are your bosses that are not necessarily the nicest people, because maybe they're also having mental health issues, and that weighing on you, and you can't talk back because you're afraid to lose your job. It's just a big snowball effect. And I think that there are some resources out there for the touring family for mental health. I wish there was more. I hope that there is more over the years. I wouldn't even know where to begin setting up something like that, but I love the fact that we at least have that now, and that at least is being talked about, because it is a very tough job. And when you've been doing it for 25 years or more, like I have, or like my friend Cosmo has, or Brian Hartley, or any of my contemporaries, you have to find those moments of solace. And they're very tough to find on a tour. That's why I tend to hibernate. I will hibernate. I will stick to myself, and I will make all the time in the world to talk to home.
I think one of the hardest things for me during the pandemic was the year before. I was out of the year, I was away from home 220 something odd days. And then you miss your family, and you speak to them, like you say, every single moment you get. But when you finally get back, you don't even, it's just like almost like you don't really fit in anymore, because everyone has gotten used to you not being there and living their lives without you. And you're so used to being on the road, and now all of a sudden you're home. And that's what I struggled with the most.
My early days, I really struggled with it. My early days was just kind of like, it was like walking into a surreal dream. Going back home, it felt very awkward, very foreign. My wife and I knew how to communicate over the phone, but we were finding that we had a hard time communicating in person. So it's something that her and I very much worked on over the years. I remember one time coming home, and she said something I said something to the effect of, "I don't feel like I have any space here." And she said, "You have a career that allows us to kind of forget that you live here. You kind of have to reclaim your space when you come home a little bit." She was like, "It's a little bit on you too." And I was like, "You know what? You're right. I didn't even think about that, because they do, us being away for, thankfully I'm not anymore doing more TV work. I get to stay home, but between 200 and 300 days a year, just like you said, takes a toll on everybody." And you're right. And I think there is, it's kind of like the parents that kept the kids' bedroom after they've graduated
Yeah.
35 years old, and not everybody's built like that.
No,
We just kind of
exactly.
spread out into our space again, and well, they don't need this, and they're not here, and da da da. And then you kind of have to come back in and kind of go, well, I need a little bit of space here, and I need this drawer back, and you have to do
Yeah.
those kinds of things. Not everybody's going to keep your bedroom for 30 years when you leave.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, absolutely. I must say, and the biggest benefit of, I mean, once I'd gotten over the initial impact of COVID and, like you said, reaching out and seeking help, it was actually getting to reconnect with my children again, and actually forming a proper relationship, in turn. Luckily, at the time, my wife had got a job, Danielle, she got a job with Deloitte, and she was able to pay the bills, and that took the pressure off me financially. But then I had to step up and be dad, and I really have got such a close relationship with both my children again now. And I'm thankful to COVID for that, because if it wasn't, I'd probably still be away from home 250 days a year.
If it wasn't for COVID, I would have never quit smoking.
Yeah.
I'm with
Yeah.
you. Like, if it was not for me living with those two very assertive, very strong-willed women who I know would cut my fucking what off if I decided to have a smoke, in the middle of all that shit, after I had proclaimed January 1st that year, before the pandemic started, that I was quitting smoking, I would probably still be doing the same circular habit that I did for years, and trying to quit. And then you switch to the gum, and then you just have the occasional cigarette, and then you're back smoking again. It's all that garbage that comes along with it. So for that, I'm incredibly thankful that I was home for all of that because I've been able to kick that habit now, and I'm very
How long are you smoke free now?
oh January 1st, 2020, so a little over four
Wow,
years.
that's amazing, man. Well done.
Very happy about it. I'm proud of it. I boast it. I'm the worst fucking ex-smoker ever. I
Do you hate people who smoke now?
I hate people who smoke. I desperately have conversations with friends of mine who are continuing to smoke. If they're young and they're stupid, I don't bust their balls too much because you're young and stupid and you may just eventually quit. But anybody who is over 40 and still smoking, I strongly encourage every one of them, please stop. I don't know the damage that I've done to myself just yet. I might not for years. I might not have any damage, and I wasn't the heaviest of smokers, thankfully, but I definitely did it. And I never thought I'd be able to quit. It was just one of those things that felt too good. Why should I quit this thing? I wake up in the morning and I don't feel right until I have one. I go to an airport. I had to navigate my whole day around a cigarette after a meal, after coffee, after this, and you justify all these things. And yeah, I finally just had to go cold turkey, give up gum, give up the nicotine patch, give up all the crap, and just get it out of my system because it was not going.
You must have been so angry.
You know what? I actually did okay. I actually did okay. I think one of the reasons I did okay was because I smoked American spirits, and I don't know if you know much about them, but they're basically just tobacco and nicotine. Whereas Marlboro's, Camels, all the other manufactured stuff has a lot of additives in it, like over 100 carcinogens in each one of those to help the cigarette burn faster. So I had switched to American cigarettes like probably 10 or 12 years prior. So really all I had to detox from was the habit and the nicotine of it. So the rest of it wasn't too bad. There's a book, I can't remember the name of the author right now, but there was a couple things that he said in there that really hit home with me. And one of them is a cigarette craving is no worse than a hunger pang. If you're feeling a little hungry, that's the same feeling that you get when you're having a cigarette craving. If you can ignore your hunger pang, you can ignore a cigarette craving because the bullshit that they sell us that quitting cigarettes is more difficult than quitting heroin is bullshit. I've watched people heroin detox. It's bullshit. It's such a lie. And it's all perpetuated by big tobacco to not get you to quit smoking. And that shit that goes back 50 years. It goes back to the 70s, and it's all just absolute garbage. And the other thing that I did every morning was wake up and go, you lied to me. You told me I was going to look like James fucking Dean. And I do not look like James fucking Dean. I look like a damn old fat football player who smokes cigarettes.
Like the camel man. I don't know if you remember all the camel adverts with the guys driving through the forest and the
Marlboro Man, absolutely, all of that shit.
Oh, that's brilliant, Rob. I've really thoroughly enjoyed this conversation with you. But there's two more questions I need to get in before we go. The first one is just because I'm a nosy bugger, and my job is to train people on MA3. Have you gone over to MA3 yet?
I haven't. I've started the process. Our programmer, our main programmer on Metallica is Joe Cabrera, and Joe is an alpha tester, and he also helps MA write the manuals for the consoles. He used to be tech support for a company called ACT Lighting, in the States, and that's how him and I met, 15 or more years ago. And when we started the last stadium run, I looked at him, I go, "Do we need to go to 3?" And he goes, "No." Okay, cool. Because he knows what we try to pull off on these shows. And he's like, it's just not ready yet for that. From what I hear now, this is the benchmark software. Whatever is going to be coming up in 2.0 is going to be kind of the benchmark of this is where we're at. We're now going to enhance, but not rebuild anymore.
Yeah.
So I've just now started to learn it. Some friends of mine flipped a few consoles over and had a bunch of us over, gave us a start show file. I had some tutorial stuff through ACT that I had, so started digging into it, and I was very happy to see that on a surface level. It's very similar to the two. So now the next step is I have some other friends in Early Bird. They do a previs shop in LA, and they are doing some classes coming up here soon that a bunch of friends of mine that are going to go to, and it's basically
2 to 3 course.
Thank you. It's a transition class from 2 to 3. So
Yeah.
I'm going to go over and do that as well. So that'll be great. But I would imagine by the end of the year, I will have fully transitioned to the 3.
Look, I highly recommend doing the training because I was also MA2 my whole life. And then
Yeah.
I traveled to Singapore to do the train the trainer program. And as soon as I actually got properly trained, because there's so many tutorials online that are so outdated and don't necessarily guide you down the right path. But as soon as I sat with somebody from MA who is trained to be a trainer, I was like, okay, bye bye MA2, because I didn't have the confidence in the software. So I'm glad you're going to go through that journey, and good luck with that. I think you're going to love it.
I do too. I really do. And I've been angry at MA for some time for releasing these consoles, and really overly over the past year, we've only really been able to boot them up in 3. Um, and I was looking at other avenues for a little while because I kind of felt like I didn't think it was the right move for them to do that. And I understand that they were trying to save their company from the Chinese knockoffs and everything else, but post this thing as the new thing and the new software, and then us really only be able to crack it open 6 years later was kind of a bummer. It's been a kind but I'm glad that we're finally there. I'm eager to get into it. This will more than likely for me be the last console that I will learn in my lifetime. I'm 50. I'm got to consider the life of the MA2 and the MA1 were so long. This will probably be the last console I have to learn. And I'm here for it. I'm very excited to see what they're doing with it. I'm very excited to see what new places we can go with what they've given us. And the thing about the one, going all the way back to the MA1, we were able to break things down on this granular level that we had never been able to do before. And that is why we all flocked to the MA2. We were to the MA. We weren't being told this is the only way you can do it. There's multiple ways to do this one thing. And I think that no matter what school of thought you came from, you were able to implement that on an MA. And that's one of the reasons I think so many of us flock to it. And we still flock to it, and they still listen, and they still have the best game around.
Okay, so one last question before I let you go.
Yeah.
If you
Yeah.
had to give somebody advice coming into this industry,
Sure.
somebody who's keen, what would you say to them?
This is always such a difficult question to answer because it just depends on the person. There's so many people out there that I give different advice to, just depends on their personality and their character. But the basics is just always be hungry for it. People will notice if you're hungry for it. If your attention to detail, if you're hungry for the job, if you're able to get it up in a timely manner, in a safe manner, and you're able to treat people with respect all at the same time, you're going to go very far. This isn't a business of yellers and screamers anymore. We're very quickly becoming a business of self-care. And part of that self-care is to treat coworkers of all types, varieties, shapes, all the way to the person that is the janitor that's cleaning up the bathrooms at the end of the night in the dressing rooms. Doesn't matter who the fuck it is. Treat everybody that walks in that venue with respect.
Awesome.
And as long as they're giving you that respect back, you're all good.
That's
There's
brilliant.
no other thing that I can say other than that. I think if you really have a passion for this, people will notice. And if you treat others respect, it will go far. With respect, it'll go far.
There's been a common thread. This is your episode, will be episode 5. And there's been a common
Mhm.
thread through all the interviews. And I've asked everyone that same question at the end. And everyone has said, don't be an asshole.
Yeah.
That's the gist of it. Just be nice.
The
Even if you're
days
the
of
best.
bullies and assholes are over. The days of bullies and assholes are over. It's done.
Yeah, even if you're the best lighting designer programmer in the world, if you're an asshole, no one's going to want to work with you.
You know what? I have watched it happen over and over again where people will just slowly leave your side. They don't really give a shit how much money you think you're putting in their pocket. They're going to walk away from you at some point because at the end of the day, we all want to be treated with respect. And if somebody gets hired for a job and they come in and they are touting themselves as being an expert and they're not doing that job properly, I will more than happily sit down with them and explain to them how they're not doing their job properly. And I'm going to give them some pointers on how they can be a little bit better. When we're in our 20s and we're young, we're all cocky. We're all stupid.
Yeah.
We think we know better than you, old man. And that's cool.
Yeah.
It's there too. I get it. Um, Once I can crack that veneer, then I'm going to be able to get to you and really give you some expert advice. And if you'll listen,
Yeah.
there's some people you can't crack through to. There's some people that are very staunch in their opinion. And it's kind of like the same thing that we see on social media anymore, where the more you try to talk to somebody, the more they dig their heels in. And I've had these conversations on social media and in person where they just won't come off of their own point. They're not hearing another view.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. They don't listen.
And to me, it's not a generational thing. And I hate the guys that will say these young kids today and all this crap. We were all dickheads in our teenage years. We were all dickheads in our 20s. Let's just get that out of the way. Okay.
That's true.
Your parents said the same thing that the parents before you did, the parents before you. This generation, blah, blah, blah. This generation's music is terrible. This generation, there's no more good bands around. No, none of that's the case. There are loads of great bands around. They're just not writing music for you, old man, period.
There we go.
50.
Period.
Not every one of these bands that's out right now writes music for me. I might like 1 out of 1,000 of them because they're writing something that I can relate to. Like my current favorite obsession is a band called Turnstile. Absolutely love them. They are still writing music that I can relate to, but there are other bands in any genre that they're not trying to relate to you, dude. They're relating to their generation, and that's okay too. You know what I mean? So it's the same thing. It's this whole cyclical thing. You sound like an old curmudgeon. So I want to embrace everybody that comes onto our tours, man. I was like, I'm going to treat you with respect as long as you treat others with respect. And I'm going to make sure that you have a long life here and that you want to stay and that you're going to be a part of this team for as long as you want to be. As long as you come in here, do your gig and treat people with respect. You don't have to do it with a smile. I don't want you to do it with a frown, but you don't have to do it with a smile. You don't have to kiss anyone's ass. Just come in and let's bang this thing out and let's be cool. And
wow,
you know what? More often than not,
awesome.
That's what I get. And more often than not,
that's awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Rob. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I'm actually glad that the natural path that this journey took with you, bringing up some sensitive issues around mental health. And I think we should all focus on that a bit more. It's been such a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Very welcome. It was my pleasure to do it. Thanks for doing this. And I'm very glad to see more and more of these types of shows and more podcasts and things of bringing awareness to this little thing that we do. Because if there's one thing we learned at the pandemic, nobody knew who the fuck we are and what we do.
Exactly.
And that is very apparent. So all these new podcasts and Tank the Tech's YouTube channel, if you haven't checked that out, highly recommend it. But
Tank the Tech?
Tank the Tech. He's a tour manager that's out there. He slung merch for a little while and he does like a weekly thing. He's on the road right now, so he hasn't been able to do too many. But he's got a great little channel. He talks about bands and their stuff and touring stuff, and we'll walk around with a video camera and show his day and all that kind of fun stuff. So it's a really good one.
Awesome.
Love that it's bringing awareness to what we actually do because there is such an amazing community out here.
Absolutely. Lots of love, Rob. Chat to you soon, mate.
Excellent, brother. Thank you very much for this. I appreciate it.